Hello! I have some books that I have read recently, and I have a book that I'm currently reading, and these are some of the books that I've read recently, and I also had a book that I borrowed, and I think one on my Kindle, and that's it. We're gonna look at them now, and I'm gonna tell you what I thought of them, so here we go. I'm just gonna go in the order of the list on my phone, which is alphabetically. So there we go. I'm gonna tell you about 7 books. The first one is The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. I didn't expect this to be as groundbreaking for me as it actually was. Not groundbreaking for me, I think it's just groundbreaking as a middle grade book. It's about this boy, he's about 6 or 7, I can't remember, but his family is moved to Auschwitz because his dad got promoted at his job and he is known as an important political figure. So they moved from their beautiful house to this not so beautiful house, and this boy is not happy about it one bit. When he looks out of the window of his new home, he's able to see a bunch of people walking around in lines, and they look like they're in pajamas. We clearly, as readers, know that they're not in pajamas, but in his point of view, they are wearing pajamas. And he sees them as all these people that know each other and have friends, and in his new house he has no friends. So one day he decides to take a walk by himself and go to this fenced off area where all of these people are, and he meets a boy on the other side of the fence who happens to be the exact same age as him and has the same birthday, and they grow sort of a friendship. And that's pretty much where the story goes. The part where I was talking about where he walks over to the fence and meets this boy doesn't happen until halfway through the book. So that was kind of weird to me because I didn't really feel like the story was going anywhere until halfway through the book. And then I flew through it because everything after that was just such good dialogue. The boy of about 6 or 7 really had this ignorance of everything that was happening around him, and it wasn't his fault, obviously. Like, his dad didn't want to tell him anything. They all wanted to keep him in this like fairy tale world where nothing was happening, where like these horrible things weren't happening, just like not even a mile away from where they lived. And then it turned out by the end of the book that the reader becomes the ignorant one, and it's just so well written, and you don't expect that from the beginning of the book, but by the end of the book it's so heartbreaking and, like I said, so groundbreaking for a middle grade read. So I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. The next book on this list is Coldest Girl in Coldtown by Holly Black, and I read this one on my Kindle. I tweeted something about this book right after I finished, and I said that it would be a great CW show. And what I meant by that was it was very entertaining. I always wanted to know what happened, and there were a lot of different storylines that you could follow throughout the novel. It was told in third person, so it wasn't necessarily just the main character that I was interested in the entire time. There was also her sister that I got her point of view from, and also the love interest, Gabriel. All of them had really interesting stories, and there were some scenes that were just, you felt like you saw them in your head. I liked that, and I liked the fact that it was a fantasy novel that I was able to sit through, because generally I don't read fantasy. So that was great. Other than that, there was a lot less depth to it than I expected. It's like it was incredibly entertaining, but did I enjoy it overall as a read? Not necessarily. I gave it 2 stars. It was very hard to place this one, honestly, because it was entertaining. If there was another book, I wouldn't read it. And if there was a CW show of it, I would definitely watch it. The next book that I'm sharing with you is Good Kings, Bad Kings by Susan Nussbaum. This book was so good. So good. It's a contemporary book about these kids that are put in a home. This home is titled like an institution for juveniles with disabilities, and it's essentially like a nursing home for children with disabilities. And you get all different perspectives from these different people too. You have it from the bus driver, you have it from someone working in the home, you have it from someone that does the accounting within the home, you have different kids that are in there with the disabilities. You see how there's such little help in those institutions, and they get very little money from the state, and they're trying to do what they can with that money. Also, it showed that there wasn't necessarily background checks on all of the people that came to work, because not a lot of people want to work in those places, and so they take what they can, and it was so good. There was teens point of views, there were also adult point of views, which I really thoroughly loved about it, because this wasn't necessarily a young adult book, nor was it necessarily an adult book. It's just one of those in-between books that tell something important that's so great, so filled with knowledge, but also it had all of these different stories in it that were so hilarious and then also so heartbreaking, and it just had everything in it. And I loved it. A lot of these characters were so funny. They all had their own distinct personalities, which I loved. This was a great book. Total great book. 5 out of 5 stars. I really feel like everyone everywhere should read it all the time. It was so great. The next thing is On Writing by Charles Bukowski, which I actually have downstairs. Not gonna go get it now. But hey, On Writing by Charles Bukowski. So good. It was just a ton of letters through the ages that Bukowski had written to different people, and they were pretty much all regarding his work, and either, you know, enclosing some of his poems and writing this letter with them, or talking about a rejection to a friend, or talking with his editor later on. Each of them had his distinct voice. Bukowski has a very raw, refreshing voice. I love it. I love it so much. It makes me really happy. And he just talked a lot about rejection initially. Like in the first half of the book, that's all that he talked about was rejection, and it made me feel really good. It made me feel like I want to get rejected in life, because he just kept going through it and kept going through it, and then eventually he didn't go through it anymore, and that was incredible to me. And just he is such an interesting person to read about, and I just really enjoyed that, so I gave it 4 stars. Really great nonfiction read, just his letters. The next book that I read was Sin Titulo, and that was a graphic novel that I was lent. I'm very nervous on wording this plot because I know that I'm going to get it completely wrong, but just know that I gave it 4 stars, and it's something that I definitely want to read again in the future, because it without a doubt deserves a good reread. It's about this guy who I believe was a journalist, and he went to his grandfather in the hospital to learn more information about him because it would help him with his journalist story that he was writing at that moment. He finds out that his grandfather has been dead for almost a month, and apparently people are trying to contact him, but he doesn't remember being contacted at all. And then he goes into the hospital room, he goes to collect some of his grandfather's things. He sees some pictures of his grandfather with people that he has never seen before in his life. He goes on sort of this investigation to come to realize that this investigation is actually coming towards him, like somebody wanted him to investigate this, and the two things sort of collide. And the thing about this graphic novel is it was one of those very literary graphic novels. It was one of those that really showed that it is a massive art, and it really brings a lot to the noveling table. It had magical realism everywhere, just so much magical realism, and the story really couldn't have been told in a straight up novel form. It had to be told in a graphic novel form, and it was so beautiful in its own respect, and I really want to own it, and I really want to reread it. It was really fantastic, and if you're into literary fiction at all, I would highly recommend it, even if you don't generally read graphic novels. The last 2 things that I want to talk about are Sweet Tooth, volumes 1 and 2, and this is by Jeff Lemire. And I read Essex County and talked about it in my last recently read and currently reading. Really enjoyed it, so I wanted to read more of his work. These were on my bookshelves. When I read the first one, it wasn't what I expected whatsoever. I literally went into this knowing nothing about it. It's post-apocalyptic, and it talks about this disease that everybody has been getting, and everyone's been dying because of this disease, and it may or may not be airborne. What we know is that after this disease became a thing, every child that was born after this disease was an animal hybrid. And apparently this disease started 7 years ago, but this boy claims that he's 9 years old, and he is very clearly an animal hybrid. He lives in the woods with his father, and his father says never to go outside ever. Something then happens where the boy is forced to go outside and see the outside world, and things happen. I liked it. It was good. I gave it like 3.5 stars. Not really what I expected or wanted at the time, but it is really well written. A week or 2 later, I decided to read the 2nd volume. So good. So much more character driven. I love when books are character driven. Jeff Lemire is a great writer, and he talks a lot about a secondary character that I was very intrigued by in the first book, and it had an Essex County sort of vibe because they really went into this character from when he was younger up until he was older, and up until all of this stuff happened, up until this disease. And it was great. So it's definitely one of those graphic novel series that just gets better as you go along, and I picked up volume 3 from Amazon, and I picked up volumes 4 and 5 from my school library, so I'll definitely be continuing this series, and I'm really thoroughly enjoying it right now. And the other thing that I'm currently reading is The Old Man War, something like that. It's from John Scalzi, and I'm reading it on my Kindle. I got introduced to John Scalzi last year in my science fiction class, and I loved it so much. I read Red Shirts in that class, and it was just so enjoyable. It was such a good science fiction humorous read, and right now Old Man's War is pretty much the same dealio. I'm just so excited to continue it, and these are all the books that I've read recently. What have you read recently? Let me know in the comments, or if you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them, and I will see you soon. Bye!